Hey, pastors and leaders, my name is Maddie Phenix, and I work on staff at Antioch, Waco. Officially, I guess you could say, the associate college pastor here in the 254. And we just got back this past Friday night from our trip to Edinburgh, Texas, on what we call Awaken. It's our spring break college mission trip. This is our 8th year to head down to Edinburgh, Texas. As I'm sure many of you know, our church has been doing this trip for over 25 years. And it is a legendary trip, to say the least. This is actually my 7th time to get to go to Edinburgh, and every year that I have gone, my life has been personally changed, and it is my joy to be on the front seat of seeing the lives of hundreds of college students come in the door one way and leave that Friday a completely different person. And as leaders and shepherds of our amazing flock, we want to do everything that we possibly can to steward all that God does in the hearts of our people. And so we try and take as many steps as we can, very precise steps, to make sure that the momentum of Awaken is stewarded well and it is fanned once our students enter back into Waco city limits. And so pretty much what happens on this trip is our students, for the first time, many of them, they share the gospel. They see somebody come to know Jesus. They see the power of God. They see healings happen. I mean, we have students that were on the fringe and they get connected to community. They get publicly encouraged. They get knit into the family. They're spending time with God every single day for an entire 60 minutes. They're hearing messages about the Father heart of God, the baptism of the Holy Spirit, how to walk out in freedom, getting God's heart for the nations, and how to actually make disciples in Waco, Texas, and in the nations of the earth. And so what we have lined up in these 5 to 6 days in Edinburgh, Texas, we want to see lived out once they come back. And that unfortunately doesn't happen naturally. It does take a little bit of work to kind of get ingrained in our people what God puts in them in those 5 to 6 days. So I wanted to share with you a few things that we've done over the past couple years to try to steward that Awaken momentum. So I'm going to pretend like it is your Friday morning and you're with your leaders at your last day of your college mission trip. I don't know if you call it Awaken, but you should. And I'm going to kind of tell you how we coach our big team leaders, and those are the leaders that we have over different pockets of students. And so I typically lead that last meeting, and I tell our leaders, I tell them that they've had an amazing 6 days, but these last few hours are some of the most critical moments for them and their people. And those critical moments happen on the 6-hour bus ride home. Believe it or not, those critical moments are not when they're sharing the gospel in the park, which is amazing, or when they're experiencing the Holy Spirit for the first time, which is amazing. But again, them being able to connect the dots and then walk those out in the context of discipleship and community, all of those pieces kind of begin to get put together on that bus ride home. So what I tell our leaders is they have 3 different responsibilities with their people on that bus ride home. One is helping their people, again, connect the dots. So I had them write down these 3 different questions that they're going to have everybody on their bus answer. What are 3 things that God did in you during this trip? And actually, we made them take 30 minutes, and every student wrote down 3 specific things that God did in them during their trip. And then what are 3 things that God did through them? So kind of not only stuff that God worked out in their hearts and minds, but what did actually God do through them? They got to see God do or be a part of God doing. Where it was miraculous or even minuscule, just something that God did through them that marked them. They write those 3 things down. And then they write down 3 things that they're going to implement in their lives to make sure that they stay changed. So again, 3 things God did in them, 3 things God did through them, and 3 things that they're going to implement into their lives so that they remain changed and even continue changing to look more like the person of Jesus. Then we have everybody on the buses walk those 3 things out with their discipleship groups. So we make sure that all the people on the buses are lined up with their discipleship groups. They spend about another half hour dialoguing. These are the 3 things God did in me. These are the 3 things God did through me. These are the 3 things I'm going to make sure continue to happen in my life. Then we have them get with their life groups. So what's happening in their lives individually gets worked out in their discipleship groups, and then at large with their life groups. And them as a life group, they talk about, man, how are we going to create a new culture for our life group based upon what we just experienced in Edinburgh, Texas? How do we become an inclusive group, not exclusive, with the people that didn't get to go on this trip? But we want to infuse this new DNA, this new kingdom that we've experienced into our life group and into our people. How are we actually going to do that? So it's kind of almost this mini pep rally that happens in the context of community on the bus ride home. So that's one big thing that we do to try and steer the momentum. And then the week back, we try and really push our people into two different veins: outreach and discipleship. So outreach, we kind of have already publicly made this announcement that in the next 2 weeks after Awaken, we want every either life group or section to plan some type of an evangelistic outreach so that that fire that they had in them in preaching the gospel repetitively in Edinburgh doesn't dwindle. And so we've encouraged them either go to a park in Waco or drive down to Austin and share on 6th Street, or go down to Fort Worth and do something with our church there. Do something where that evangelistic fire is continuing to be fanned. Also, discipleship. We're really pushing our people. If you are not making disciples, make disciples. And so that is just our two largest anthems coming back, is how are you preaching the gospel as a person and as a life group? And then how are you being and making disciples? And one big thing that Carl hit on this past week at our pillar meeting, our pillars are our college students that are serving in a ministry within our church. So more than just our life group leaders, it's everybody that's in kids ministry, that's serving with our Stars mentoring project, on the worship team, on the AV team. We gather once a month, and it's kind of an hour meeting before our college service. So we gather them all, and again, the main message was, how are we stewarding what God did in us this past week? How do we steward that passion? And one thing that Carl said was radical transformation demands radical commitment, radical steps, and also a radical process. And so he kind of helped walk each of our students through, what does that look like for you? What are your radical steps? What is your radical commitment? What is your radical response or process? Because what you just experienced is amazing, but it takes intention to steward it. And so we're trying to help people do that as individuals, but also try to do that publicly as a college ministry by saying, you got to go for it in outreach, and you got to go for it in discipleship. Again, this week is going to be amazing for you, your college ministry, and your church. So as the leaders, you have the opportunity to fan every single flame that God puts in your students this week. So have fun and be great leaders.